shitty, awful parts about entrepreneurship, because I don't think when I was in your seat, nobody really did me the service of kind of telling you what the lifestyle was really like, the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. Because when I started my company, I don't think I was adequately prepared to kind of deal with that and deal with the grind. So a lot of my discussion today is going to kind of be about my personal experience with my company, Let's Move Down, and kind of the challenges that I dealt with. And I want to keep this as candid as possible to give you guys the most useful knowledge. So ask questions, interrupt me, disagree with me, call me an idiot, all that stuff I love, because the whole point of this is kind of giving you guys a little bit better of an understanding for what it's really like to kind of plunge into the deep end and run your own company. Cool? All right, so we'll go to the next slide. So we have a quick agenda here. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself because you have no idea who I am, and that's kind of relevant. I'm going to talk about startups, the perception versus reality, and that was the first point about why I asked you what you thought it was like to run a startup, because I think in the media and reading all these articles and seeing all these billionaires running around, it's very easy to kind of lose track for what running a company really is. And then I'm going to talk about the phases of running a digital startup, kind of from the idea into the exit, and walk you through each one of my experiences there. And then lessons, talk about the main lessons I learned and share some videos from people a lot smarter than me that can probably fill you in a lot better. And finally, my final takeaway. So again, ask as many questions as you want. I want this to be interactive, and most of all, I want you to get some sort of value out of me standing up here. So next slide. So this is just about me. I was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. I lived up in the Montgomery area, went to Sycamore High School, and then went to Miami University for undergrad. I got my degree in finance. So after college, I ended up moving to Washington, D.C. to chase this girl who I was dating, who later became my wife. So she wanted to work on Capitol Hill, and I was like, sure, what the hell, I'll try out D.C. And I got a job at a company called Capital Source, which provided financing to private equity companies who bought and sold other companies. So I specialized in technology and software startups and really got to learn how to analyze financial statements and value a company, and learned, how these startups created business models and value, which was very relevant and good to know. While I was at Capital Source, I decided to get my MBA part-time at the University of Maryland. So kind of like you all right now, I worked a pretty demanding day job and then went to class at night for 3 hours, which was completely miserable. But got through that, and kind of like some of you here, I was 25 years old, I was working in finance, making good money, but I was missing something. Like there was just something inside of me that said, like, I need to do something with my life. I need to get out there and see if I can actually do the ultimate, which in my mind was run a company. So, I kind of talked about it for a couple of years, and I was getting to the point where I was like, oh, crap, like I could get married, I could have a kid, I could be 40 years old and still working at this finance company, and my life could be essentially over. So through school, I met this brilliant engineer whose name was Federico Campbell, and him and I got to brainstorming, and finally we settled on an idea that I felt confident enough to where I just quit my job one day with no safety net, no clients, no product, no nothing, and try to make it work. And we created this company called Let's Move Down, which I'll talk about. We ran that for 3 years, 3 of the hardest years of my life, and then ultimately we got acquired by a company called One Up Sports in 2014. I worked with One Up Sports for a year as part of our earnout. And an earnout's like when you sell a company, you're contractually obligated to work with them for a set number of years. In return, they will pay you the money that they said they buy your company for. So after our first year of working with One Up, Federico and I got fired, which was an incredible story in itself. So after 1 year, not only did I sell my company, but I lost my company, and I was kind of sitting in DC in 2015 with no job, with a kid now, and thought to myself, I miss Cincinnati. Like I love the town, my family was here. I wanted to do something else, so I got a job with Everything But the House. Have you heard of that company? Yeah. Super cool. So yeah, a really cool startup in Cincinnati that's growing like crazy. And I didn't think I had the energy to do another startup after my experience, but I wanted to kind of be in that startup realm and have that experience and do something that could be not $1 million company, but $1 billion company. So landed there, and been there since October. So that's my background. So I've kind of run the gamut. I have a broad range of experiences, and again, pepper me with questions about who I am and what I can do for you guys. Any questions on that before I move on?
Are we going to get into what Let's Move Down is?
Oh yeah, you're going to get plenty of Let's Move Down. So I'm just setting the stage.
Gotcha.
You're going to cover the details of the fire during an earnout?
Yeah.
I have a confidentiality provision, but I will share as much as I can.
I didn't even know they could do that.
I still got paid, so it was fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was my question.
How I got fired? I'll tell you the story. Yeah.
Is it mandatory that you work for the company when you get acquired?
I'm sorry?
Is it mandatory that?
It's not mandatory, but having been at Capital Source where we structure deals like this and having been through it, typically you're going to have a 3-year earnout, so your payment will be carved up into thirds. So if you buy your company for, I'm just throwing out a number, $10 million, we usually get some of that in cash and some of that in stock, and it will be paid a third at signing, a third after year 1, and a third after year 2. And typically you have financial metrics associated with that earnout payment. We did not, which was awesome, which is why we got through that. But yeah, I mean, it's all a negotiation at the end of the day. But usually when you get acquired, they want to keep the founders on board to maintain the business and maintain the growth that has already been occurring.
So what, like you talked about, you felt like you were missing something. How did you know that this was the avenue that you were missing? I have 2 questions. That and like, is the goal then once you start to be acquired, or
No.
to just be massive?
So your second question first. So on one of the slides, I'll talk about the stage of a startup, which is an exit. So there's a couple scenarios. I mean, there's lifestyle businesses where you're just making money and love what you do and you have no obligation of being sold. You could get acquired, which is what we decided to do. You could double down, which is what Everything But the House is doing, and potentially try to go public or try to get acquired for 10 figures. Like it runs the gamut. So it all kind of depends on what your situation is and what you think the best move for your investors and your business was. We were at a critical point, and I'm kind of jumping ahead in our company, where Ticketmaster, who I'm sure you all heard of, was looking to enter our space. And we realized that if Ticketmaster entered our space, we would be completely screwed and potentially go out of business. So we were at kind of the high point in our growth stage where we had some people sniffing around, and Federico and I said, this isn't probably the best path for us. We could roll the dice and try to get this bigger, but bird in hand, like, let's take this deal, because if Ticketmaster enters the space, we're screwed. And 9 months after the acquisition, Ticketmaster entered the space, and the company that bought us was screwed, but not my problem. So your first point, like, how did I feel, what was missing inside of me? I don't know. I mean, everyone's different. Like, I get antsy quickly. Like, I want to teach now, which is why I've hassled Dr. Delzy for like 25 emails to actually get in this class and teach all of you, because like that's something that I thought would be cool to kind of scratch an area that interests me. So I'm kind of always searching for the next thing, and being in a 9-to-5 job year after year after year, that didn't cut it for me. And I also wanted to be like 60 years old and look back at my life and at least say to myself, well, hell, I took a chance at least. At least I put myself out there. And if I failed, I'm still young enough where I can rebound, but no regrets. And I've always felt, and you guys can disagree with me, that running a company is probably the hardest thing you can do, because you're turning nothing into something. Like, not many people can say they can do that. So that's why I did it. Everybody has their different motivations, but that's kind of what I wanted to do. Is that fair? Okay, cool. All right, so this kind of goes into the first question I asked, is what you all think of a startup versus, in my opinion, what a startup really is. So I'm giving you a couple perception versus realities out there. And I was, when I was in school and we had guest speakers, everybody always oversimplified being in a startup. It'd be like, oh, I had this idea, and 6 months later we raised $10 million, and 6 months later we hired our 100th employee, and 6 months later we sold for $20 million, piece of cake. And I always thought that that did everybody an injustice. And if you look at the media and you just look at all the success out there, it's very easy to lose track of, you just build an app, you throw it out there, and then 18 months later you're a millionaire. It doesn't work like that. So this is kind of my segue into trying to get you into the frame of mind if you do decide to go down this path, what to expect. So the first one is startup atmosphere. It's awesome, right? Like, you play ping pong, you do foosball, you get drunk all the time, like everybody's happy and young and smart and energetic, and it's just a bunch of really talented people coming together to change the world. In reality, this is more what the startup experience is like, because you're creating something out of nothing, and you're the only person out there that has to do this. I was fortunate enough to at least have a business partner on day one, so I had somebody to associate with, but we had an office in DC that we called the Den, which was in the basement of a law firm, which is how we got Let's Move Down started. And when Federico was gone, or when I was gone, like, that was pretty much me staring at the wall being like, why isn't anyone calling? Like, why does anyone care about my product? Like, how can I actually get somebody to pay attention to me? And the loneliness was maddening. And not only that, but you're going through something that most people can't relate to, because your friends, at this age, 25, 26 years old, they have jobs, they have money, they have health care, they can go out on vacation, and you're stuck like a schmuck in your office with no money, no health care, no prospects. And it's very hard and demoralizing. It's very hard to associate and relate to somebody. So just remember, if you go down this path, it's great to have a support network of other entrepreneurs, other people who have been through this, and kind of being on the other side now, like it's kind of like a club where like anybody who has the stones to jump in and start a business, I'll do whatever I can to help them, just because I respect them and I know the loneliness that can be involved. So just one reality that I've experienced. The next one is lifestyle. It's money, money, right? Like this is the easiest way to get rich. You see Silicon billionaires everywhere. It's just a high lifestyle, right? The reality is this is it. I lived on $1,500 a month for 2 years, and I know you guys are mostly in school, so you don't know what that means, but my rent in DC was $900, so I basically had $600 to feed myself, to pay my cell phone, to travel for my business, to do whatever I had to do to survive. And the bills pile up. I mean, we bootstrapped, and bootstrap means that you basically self-fund yourself in the early days, so we were paying out of our savings, and nobody really gave us money in the first days. So that's what it was like, and luckily I was married, so I had my wife's health insurance and made her life miserable by being a deadbeat for a while. But some people don't have that luxury, and that's a reality that you kind of have to accept if you're going down this path. And what's great about everybody in this room is that you're young. You don't have kids, probably, you're not married, so now's the time to kind of take that risk, because the financial hardships are real. It's not like you're going to be making $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year getting your startup off the ground. It's a falsehood. So the attitude, kumbaya, happy-go-lucky, everybody loves it, you wake up doing what you do, and you're energized because you're building something, and that's all true, and those are definitely the highs, but the reality is what I call the emotional roller coaster. We're going to face the highest of highs and the lowest of lows that you've ever faced. In the span of a week on Let's Move Down, we had signed the Washington Wizards and Washington Capitals for our product, which was like the biggest deal in the world because our company was like 6 months old, and I thought this is going to take us to the next level. And like the high I felt then was unlike anything I felt. 48 hours later, they canceled our contract on a Friday at 5 o'clock, and that was the worst I've ever felt in my life, because what I thought was going to be our launching point was taken away from me with no explanation. And we had to rebound from that, and we had a month of cash left to make something happen. So like you go up and down, up and down, up and down. It's very demanding and it's very psychologically challenging to kind of go through that. And that's a reality that I think outside the financial stress is probably the hardest thing to cope with. Your coworkers, all your buddies, I mean, you can build a business with your friends, you can build a business with anybody in this classroom, you can pick who you hire, which is awesome, so you don't have to deal with terrible coworkers, of which I've had to deal with for the last 10 years of my career. It's great. The reality is, at least this was my experience, like this is more like working with your coworkers in a startup, and this is like that because I actually got into a fist fight with my co-founder, Federico. I'm like straight out fist fight where we punched each other in our office with the lawyers upstairs who we were leasing from. And go ahead.
Was alcohol involved at least?
No, it wasn't. This was 11 a.m. on a Friday. We drank afterwards to kind of mend the score, but our situation was that we were with the Memphis Grizzlies, our first pro team. This was probably 8 months into our company's existence. And we were doing great, and then our sales fell off, and I'll explain what our company does in a minute. And we were trying to brainstorm how we get this back on track because we were running out of cash, and we had given ourselves an arbitrary deadline 1 month before we shut up shop because we just couldn't sustain not having money to live. So we were brainstorming ideas, and I threw out an idea that I thought was good and that could potentially help us, and he shot it down in an overly sarcastic way, which, because it was such a powder keg at the time, pissed me off. So I started screaming at him, he screamed at me, and before you know it, we're punching each other, and our CTO has to come and take us off each other. So it kind of goes hand in hand with the people you go into business with, it's that bond because you need each other to survive, but at the same time, it's so freaking stressful that that's not uncommon to get into screaming matches with these folks. You really have to kind of think about who you're going to go to battle with because you're going to need these people on your lowest of lows and highest of highs. Any questions on kind of my perceptions versus reality? Is that fair? I don't want to like ruin everybody, but I think it's important to kind of understand what this is.
Did you face any legal trouble at all?
Yes, we did. So I'll kind of talk about what Let's Move Down is quickly and then go into more detail. So Let's Move Down was a mobile application that allowed people at live sporting events to upgrade their seats for an incremental price, also buy coupons or fan experience passes such as locker room tours or shoot half-court shots or stuff like that. So we basically monetize live sporting events through an in-game mobile marketplace. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So our first client was the University of Maryland for their basketball team, and the University of Maryland had a contract with StubHub to be their secondary ticket provider. So basically StubHub had the right to sell any University of Maryland tickets before the game started. That's called the secondary market. The primary market is like when the University of Maryland sells you tickets, and then obviously you can sell them to other people through StubHub. So when we got the contract, StubHub sent us a cease and desist letter because they said that they were the official secondary ticket provider and we could not do in-game seating upgrades because they ran that market, which didn't exist at the time. So we called our product the tertiary marketplace, which basically means the third tier, which basically means anything, yeah, StubHub will agree we will never sell a ticket prior to the game, but once the game starts, the tertiary ticket marketplace starts, and we run that now because we have an exclusive contract with the University of Maryland. So through that little legal maneuver, we stopped ourselves from getting the crap suit out of us and going out of business before we even got off the ground. So that was probably the biggest legal challenge we had. Ticketmaster also threatened to sue us a couple of times, but then we worked out a partnership with them where we paid them a lot of money to be an official Ticketmaster provider. So the incumbents are the incumbents because they have a shit ton of resources and they'll throw it at you. So you have to be prepared for potentially getting sued or getting threatened to sue, and you have to react accordingly. And it's just a bunch of luck and timing and kind of being nimble. Do you want me to click?
No. But we're getting ready to start a new section, and this only films 30 minutes of